with the endless rhythm of honking cabs, hurried footsteps, and the distant wail of sirens. Neon signs flicker in and out of focus against the backdrop of towering skyscrapers, their glass exteriors reflecting the city's ceaseless motion. Yet, amidst the glow and movement, there are shadows, places where people go unnoticed, where life moves at a different pace. Jason Carter knew those shadows well. 12 years old, wrapped in a thin, oversized hoodie, he shuffled down the sidewalk, his breath forming small clouds in the freezing winter air. His sneakers, worn and splitting at the seams, barely offered any warmth as he stepped over slushy puddles of half-melted snow. The city moved around him, indifferent to his presence. Pedestrians in thick coats and scarves brushed past him without a second glance. To them, he was just another street kid, part of the city's forgotten underbelly. Jason had grown used to the hunger gnawing at his insides. It came in waves, sometimes dull, sometimes sharp and insistent, like now. His last meal had been a half-eaten sandwich he found in a trash can the night before. His stomach twisted at the memory, but hunger had long since killed any sense of pride. As he wandered past a brightly lit diner, his feet slowed. The warmth spilling out from inside was almost tangible, like an invisible force calling him closer. He pressed his hands into his armpits for warmth and took a hesitant step toward the large glass window. Inside, people sat at polished booths, their faces flushed from the heat, laughing between bites of steaming food. Plates of burgers stacked with crisp lettuce, golden fries dripping in ketchup, bowls of thick, creamy soup. The scent of freshly baked bread curled through the air, making Jason's mouth water. His fingers curled into fists inside his hoodie pocket. He'd been here before, staring, hoping, knowing no one would offer him a seat inside. The staff usually shooed kids like him away before they could linger too long, before the sight of them ruined someone's appetite. Tonight felt no different. But then, a voice. "Are you hungry?" Jason flinched, startled. He turned quickly, his wide brown eyes locking onto a woman standing just a few feet away. She was tall, dressed in a crisp white coat that looked expensive, her blonde hair falling in soft waves over her shoulders. Her piercing blue eyes studied him, not with pity, not with disdain, but with something else, something unfamiliar. He hesitated, unsure how to respond. The city had taught him to be wary of kindness. The woman reached into her purse and pulled out a neatly folded $10 bill. She extended it toward him. "Here," she said, "get yourself something warm to eat." Jason stared at the bill, his mind racing. $10 could buy a meal, maybe even two if he stretched it right. His stomach twisted again, reminding him of its emptiness. Still, he hesitated. "What's the catch?" His voice was rough from disuse, his suspicion clear. The woman's lips curved into a faint smile. "No catch," she said. "Just a meal, no strings attached." Jason glanced between the money and the woman, trying to decide. Finally, hunger won. He reached out, snatching the bill before stuffing it deep into his pocket. "Thanks," he mumbled. The woman nodded. "You're welcome." She turned back toward the diner, pulling open the door. The warmth of the restaurant rushed out, washing over Jason like a wave. He took a step closer, ready to follow, already imagining the taste of hot food on his tongue. Then, it happened. A deafening boom shattered the night. The ground beneath Jason trembled as an explosion ripped through the diner. The large glass window in front of him burst outward, sending shards flying into the street. Screams filled the air as patrons stumbled back, some falling, others rushing for the exit. Thick black smoke billowed from inside, curling toward the sky like a living thing. Jason's body went rigid. His ears rang from the force of the blast, but his mind worked through the chaos, picking apart what he was seeing. Fire. Everywhere. The flickering neon sign above the entrance sputtered as flames licked at the building's frame. Inside, the once cozy diner was quickly turning into an inferno. Tables were overturned, chairs scattered. People coughed, stumbled, pushed toward the doors. Jason's heart pounded as he scanned the crowd, his mind racing. Then his stomach dropped. The woman. He spotted her near the back of the diner, her white coat now streaked with soot, coughing as she tried to stand. Panic flashed across her face as the flames surged around her. The exit was blocked. Jason barely had time to think. His pulse roared in his ears. His instinct screamed, "Run!" But his feet stayed planted. She had seen him, given him something, a rare act of kindness in a world that often ignored him. Jason clenched his jaw, and then he ran toward the fire. The heat was unbearable. The air was thick with smoke, suffocating and acrid, but Jason didn't stop running. His lungs burned with each breath, his heart hammering in his chest as he pushed forward into the chaos. Flames crackled, devouring everything in their path. The once cozy diner had become an inferno, its walls and ceiling groaning under the relentless assault of fire. Screams filled the air as terrified patrons stumbled toward the exit, their faces masks of panic. Some had made it out, but not everyone. Jason's wide eyes scanned the room through the dense smoke, searching desperately. Then he saw her. Miranda Hayes was slumped against an overturned table, coughing violently, her normally pristine white blouse stained with soot. Her blonde hair, which had gleamed in the daylight, was now damp with sweat, clinging to her face. She tried to move but faltered, clutching her ankle in pain. Jason's instinct screamed at him to run, to get out before the flames swallowed everything. But he couldn't leave her. She had been kind to him, the first person in a long time to even look at him with something other than indifference. And now, she was trapped. Summoning every ounce of courage, Jason darted through the maze of overturned chairs and fallen debris. "Miss!" he called, his voice barely carrying over the roar of the fire. Miranda lifted her head, her blue eyes glazed with confusion before recognition flickered in them. "You," she croaked. Jason knelt beside her, his small frame tensed with urgency. "We have to go," he said. He reached for her arm, but she winced, gripping her ankle. I think it's sprained," she gasped. Jason swallowed hard. The flames were closing in, licking hungrily at the wooden beams overhead. They didn't have time. He shifted beside her, wrapping her arm around his shoulders. "Lean on me," he instructed, bracing himself for the added weight. Miranda hesitated, then nodded weakly. She clung to him as he helped her to her feet, her body trembling. Every step was agonizingly slow, but Jason gritted his teeth and pressed forward. The entrance was only a few feet away, glowing with the outside light. But as they approached, a loud crack split the air. Jason barely had time to react before a burning beam crashed down in front of them, sending a blast of heat and embers into their faces. Miranda cried out, shielding her eyes. Jason coughed, his throat raw, his mind racing. The exit was blocked. They were trapped. Think. His gaze darted around frantically. Then he spotted it, the kitchen's back door slightly ajar, a possible escape. "This way," Jason urged, half dragging Miranda as he changed course. They stumbled into the kitchen, where the fire hadn't yet fully consumed the space. The air was still thick with smoke, but it was breathable. Jason led them toward the exit, his grip on Miranda tightening as she struggled to keep up. Behind them, something exploded. The blast knocked them off balance, sending them crashing to the ground. Jason landed hard, pain jolting through his knees. Miranda groaned beside him, her breathing shallow. Jason ignored the pain and scrambled to his feet. He grabbed Miranda's arm again. "Almost there. Just a little more." Through sheer willpower, Miranda pushed herself forward. Together they staggered toward the back door. Jason shoved against it with all his might. It didn't budge. Number. No, no, no. His heart pounded as he searched for another way. Then he saw a heavy trash can nearby. With the last of his strength, he kicked it toward the door, ramming it into the frame. The impact forced the door open a fraction. Jason squeezed through the gap, pulling Miranda along. Cool air hit them like a wave. They had made it. Jason stumbled forward, barely registering the sound of approaching sirens. Strong hands suddenly grabbed him, guiding both him and Miranda away from the collapsing building. Firefighters swarmed around them, their voices a mixture of urgency and reassurance. Jason collapsed onto the pavement, gasping for air. Beside him, Miranda was trembling, her face streaked with ash. But she was alive. A firefighter knelt beside them, checking for injuries. "You're lucky to be breathing, kid," he said, looking at Jason with something like admiration. Jason barely heard him. His mind was spinning, his body spent. But through the haze of exhaustion, one thought remained. He had saved her. And now, what would happen next? The acrid scent of smoke still clung to the air, mixing with the crisp night breeze. Jason stood outside the burnt shell of the diner, his tattered hoodie doing little to keep out the cold. Around him, chaos unfolded. Firefighters hosing down the embers, paramedics tending to the injured, and reporters shoving microphones at dazed witnesses. He was about to slip away when a firm voice stopped him. "You saved her life." Jason turned. Standing before him was a man who seemed to command the very space around him. Tall, impeccably dressed in a tailored navy suit, with sharp eyes that assessed him like a chess piece on a board. Jason swallowed. He didn't know who this guy was, but something about him felt important. Behind them, Miranda sat on the open tailgate of an ambulance, wrapped in a thick grey blanket. Her blonde hair was matted with sweat and soot, but she still looked like she belonged on the cover of a magazine. She met Jason's gaze, her expression unreadable. The man stepped closer, adjusting his silver cufflinks. "I'm Lex Montgomery," he said smoothly. "Miranda's boyfriend." Jason blinked. Boyfriend? He looked back at Miranda, then at Lex. She was a millionaire's girlfriend. Lex reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a sleek leather wallet. "I owe you for this," he said, extracting a crisp stack of $100 bills. "Take it." Jason's stomach tightened. That was more money than he had ever seen in one place. His fingers twitched, but he forced himself to step back. "I don't want it," he muttered. Lex raised a brow. "No? I just wanted to help." A flicker of something, surprise maybe, crossed Lex's face before it disappeared. Miranda exhaled shakily. "Jason, you don't have anywhere to go, do you?" Jason stiffened. He didn't like when people could read him like that. "Stay with us for the night," she said, her voice softer. "Please." Jason hesitated. He didn't belong in their world, but the alternative was the streets, and tonight, the streets felt colder than usual. Lex clapped a hand on his shoulder. "Come on, kid. Consider it an adventure." Jason looked up at the man's unreadable expression, then back at Miranda's kind eyes. He nodded. A sleek black limousine pulled up to the curb. The driver stepped out and held the door open. Jason swallowed hard. Was he really doing this? He took a deep breath and climbed in. Jason had never seen anything like this before. The penthouse loomed above the city, a towering monument of wealth and power. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the glittering New York skyline, and every inch of the space gleamed with elegance. He hesitated at the threshold, feeling unworthy of stepping inside. "Come in, Jason," Miranda said softly, placing a reassuring hand on his back. He took a tentative step forward, his worn sneakers barely making a sound against the polished marble floor. A woman in a crisp uniform appeared out of nowhere, her voice gentle yet professional. "Shall I draw a bath for the young sir?" Jason stiffened. Young, sir? No one had ever addressed him like that. He glanced at Miranda and Lex, expecting them to laugh, to tell him it was all a joke. But Miranda only smiled. That sounds like a great idea. Jason swallowed hard. The idea of a hot bath was tempting. He couldn't remember the last time he'd been properly clean, but a part of him resisted. He had spent too long fending for himself, relying on no one. Accepting kindness felt dangerous. Sure, he mumbled, following the woman down a long corridor. The bathroom was bigger than any place he had ever lived. White marble gleamed under soft golden lighting, and the bathtub itself looked deep enough to swim in. Steam curled up as warm water filled the tub, carrying the scent of something floral and unfamiliar. Jason hesitated before peeling off his threadbare hoodie and slipping into the water. The heat wrapped around him, sinking into his aching muscles. He closed his eyes and exhaled, his body relaxing for the first time in years. He scrubbed at his skin, watching dirt swirl away in the water. When he finally stepped out, a neatly folded set of clothes awaited him. Soft, expensive fabric that felt foreign against his skin. He dressed quickly, tugging at the sleeves, uncomfortable in their pristine perfection. Returning to the dining room, Jason hesitated at the threshold. The long wooden table, set with fine china and silverware, stretched before him like something out of a dream. The chandelier overhead cast a golden glow, and the scent of freshly cooked food made his stomach twist with longing. Lex motioned for him to sit. Jason did, his hands curling into fists on his lap. "You must be hungry," Miranda said, her voice warm. Jason nodded, but when the food was placed in front of him, steak, mashed potatoes, warm bread, he hesitated. It felt wrong sitting here surrounded by luxury while he had spent years digging through dumpsters for scraps. He took a cautious bite. The flavors exploded in his mouth, rich and overwhelming. His hands shook slightly as he reached for another. Lex watched him carefully. "So, Jason," he said, his voice smooth and unreadable. "Tell me about yourself." Jason stiffened. This was the moment he had been dreading. He forced himself to meet Lex's gaze. "Not much to tell," he said carefully. "I've been on my own for a while." Lex didn't press, but Miranda leaned forward, her eyes soft with concern. "What happened to your family?" Jason's throat tightened. He had told himself he wouldn't talk about it, but something about the warmth in Miranda's gaze made him falter. "My mom," he cleared his throat. "She died when I was little. I never knew my dad." Silence settled over the table. Jason shifted uncomfortably, waiting for pity, for judgment. But Lex only studied him, his expression unreadable. "You've survived on your own all this time?" Lex asked. Jason nodded. "Yeah." Miranda swallowed hard, blinking rapidly as if holding back tears. "That's incredible," she whispered. Lex leaned back in his chair, tapping his fingers against the armrest. "You've got a good head on your shoulders, kid," he said finally. "Resourceful, smart, brave." Jason wasn't sure how to respond. He wasn't used to compliments. Lex exchanged a glance with Miranda before turning back to Jason. "I have an offer for you," he said. Jason tensed. Here it was, the catch. Lex smiled, but there was something calculating in his gaze. "How would you like to change your life?" Jason stared at him, heart pounding. Jason sat stiffly in the oversized leather chair, his fingers gripping the armrests as though the entire room might swallow him whole. Across from him, Lex Montgomery leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. The office was unlike anything Jason had ever seen, a world of mahogany, glass, and soft, dim lighting that screamed wealth and power. Miranda sat nearby, offering an encouraging smile, but Jason barely noticed. His eyes darted to the grand bookshelf lining one wall, the expensive paintings and the pristine chess set placed on a polished oak table. He had no business being here. Lex's voice cut through the thick silence. "How would you like to stay here for a while?" Jason's head snapped toward him, his stomach knotting. He had spent years learning that offers of kindness often came with a hidden cost. His life had taught him that no one did something for nothing. He narrowed his eyes, shifting in his seat. "Why?" Lex studied him with a measured gaze. "Because you saved Miranda's life. Because you're a kid who deserves better than the streets. And because I can help." Jason scoffed. "And what do you get out of it?" Lex let out a soft chuckle. "You're smart, Jason. I like that." He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the desk. "I'm not asking for anything. No strings. You stay here, get a roof over your head, food, schooling, things every kid should have. If at any point you don't want to be here, you're free to leave." Jason looked at Miranda, expecting her to contradict Lex. Instead, she nodded, her eyes full of sincerity. "We just want to help, Jason. You don't have to do this alone anymore." Jason's fingers curled into his palms. The idea of staying in a place like this, surrounded by warmth, safety, and food he didn't have to scavenge for. It was too much. Too unreal. "I don't need charity." His voice came out sharp, defensive. Lex didn't flinch. "This isn't charity. It's an opportunity." Jason swallowed hard. He had been through the system before. Foster homes, shelters, temporary guardians who always let him down. People always promised better, but it never lasted. He had learned that the only person he could rely on was himself. Yet, as he glanced at the clean carpet beneath his sneakers, at the smooth walls unmarred by graffiti or peeling paint, at the way Miranda watched him with genuine concern, he felt something unfamiliar, a sliver of doubt in his usual certainty. What if this time was different? "Jason," Miranda said softly, "you deserve this. Let someone help you for once." His throat tightened. He wanted to believe her, but belief was dangerous. For a long moment, the room was silent. Then, with a slow exhale, Jason nodded. Just once, almost imperceptibly. Lex didn't react with triumph, only with a slight knowing smile. "Good. Let's get you settled in." Jason pushed back his chair and stood, feeling untethered, like he had just agreed to something far bigger than he understood. Miranda gestured for him to follow her through the grand hallway, past marble floors and chandeliers that dripped with light. When they reached the guest wing, she stopped in front of a door and turned the handle. Jason stepped inside, hesitating on the threshold. The bedroom was enormous. A king-sized bed sat against the far wall, its white sheets crisp and untouched. A window stretched from floor to ceiling, offering a breathtaking view of the city skyline. There was a desk, a reading nook, and a walk-in closet filled with clothes that weren't his. The air smelled of cedarwood and something expensive he couldn't place. Jason hesitated, stepping deeper inside. He ran a hand along the polished wooden desk, then the soft fabric of a hoodie draped over the chair. It was too much, too strange, too not his life. He turned to Miranda, words lodging in his throat. She seemed to understand. "Take your time," she said gently. "We'll be downstairs if you need anything." And then she was gone, closing the door softly behind her. Jason stood there, staring at the unfamiliar space. He was used to park benches and subway stations, to cardboard boxes and stolen blankets. Now, he was in a penthouse with a bed big enough to drown in. He sank onto the mattress, gripping the sheets, half expecting the illusion to shatter. But it didn't. For the first time in years, he wasn't outside. He wasn't cold. Still, as he lay back and stared at the ceiling, one question lingered in his mind. Did he really belong here? Jason lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. The penthouse was silent except for the faint hum of city life beyond the thick glass windows. The sheets were softer than anything he had ever touched, the pillows plush and inviting, yet sleep eluded him. The unfamiliarity of it all, the warmth, the cleanliness, the security, made him uneasy. He had spent years adapting to the cold, to hunger, to uncertainty. Now, with everything he had ever dreamed of handed to him, he felt lost. He turned on his side, staring at the neatly folded clothes on the chair. Miranda had picked them out for him, a navy blazer, crisp white shirt, tailored slacks, his new school uniform. His stomach twisted at the thought of what tomorrow would bring. Would he even belong there? Morning arrived faster than he wanted. Miranda knocked on his door, her voice gentle. "Jason, time to get ready. Big day." Jason sat up reluctantly, rubbing his face before dressing. The uniform felt stiff against his skin, a stark contrast to the oversized, ragged hoodie he had worn just days ago. When he emerged from his room, Lex was waiting by the grand staircase. "You look sharp," Lex remarked with a satisfied nod. "Ready to take on the world?" Jason forced a small smile. "I guess." Miranda stepped forward, adjusting his tie. "You'll do great. Just be yourself." Jason didn't know who himself was anymore. The private school loomed before him, its towering gates and pristine stone facade intimidating. Students streamed in, dressed just like him but different in every way. Their backpacks were new, their shoes polished, their faces filled with ease. Jason adjusted the strap on his bag, also new, feeling like an imposter. Inside, the school was just as overwhelming. Polished floors, marble staircases, lockers lined neatly down endless hallways. He followed Miranda and Lex to the principal's office, where a stern-looking man with silver-rimmed glasses and an impeccably pressed suit greeted them. "Mr. Montgomery, Miss Hayes," the principal said warmly, shaking their hands before turning to Jason. His smile faltered slightly, as if assessing whether Jason truly belonged here. "Welcome to Westwood Academy, Jason. We have high expectations here, but I trust you'll rise to the occasion." Jason nodded stiffly. He had never been inside an office like this before, let alone spoken to a man like the principal. "You'll be starting in the sophomore class," the principal continued. "Your teachers are aware of your background and will provide additional tutoring as needed." Jason hated that word, background. It made him feel like an exhibit, like he had been put on display for the world to see how different he was. "Thank you," Lex said, patting Jason's shoulder. "He's a fast learner. I'm sure he'll do great." Jason wasn't so sure. His first class was history. He slid into a seat at the back, hoping to go unnoticed. That hope was short-lived. "Who's the new kid?" a voice whispered from across the room. "Heard he was homeless," another voice muttered. Jason's grip tightened on his pen. He kept his head down, pretending not to hear, but the murmurs didn't stop. At lunch, he carried his tray awkwardly through the cafeteria, scanning for an empty table. He felt the weight of stares, the judgment in their eyes. He finally settled at a corner table, alone. "You're sitting in our spot," a voice cut through the noise. Jason looked up to see a boy with slicked-back blonde hair and a smirk that oozed arrogance. A group of boys flanked him, all wearing the same air of entitlement. Jason met his gaze, gripping his tray. Didn't see a name on it. A few students nearby snickered, but the blonde boy didn't appreciate the humor. "You don't belong here, Carter." Jason stiffened. "Neither do you." The boy scoffed, leaning in. "You think because Lex Montgomery took you in, that makes you one of us? You're a charity case." Jason clenched his jaw, but before he could respond, Miranda's voice cut through the tension. "Jason!" she called from across the cafeteria, waving him over to a different table. Reluctantly, he picked up his tray and walked away, hearing the boys chuckle behind him. Later that evening, Jason sat on the balcony of the penthouse, staring at the city lights. He had been given everything: warmth, shelter, opportunity, but the walls of the school felt colder than the streets ever had. "You okay?" Miranda's voice was soft as she approached. Jason didn't turn. Maybe this was a mistake. She sat beside him, pulling her knees up. "Change is hard. I know it feels like you don't belong, but that's only because you haven't found your place yet." Jason exhaled slowly. "What if I never do?" "You will," Miranda assured him. "You don't have to prove anything to anyone. Just take it one day at a time." Jason wanted to believe her, but doubt gnawed at him. He had spent years surviving on his own, fighting for every meal, every moment. He wasn't sure he knew how to be anything else. As the city buzzed below, Jason stared at the stars, wondering if he had made the right choice. Jason had never known silence could be this loud. The penthouse was usually alive with movement, distant chatter from the staff, the hum of city traffic below, the soft clinking of glasses in the kitchen. But tonight, as Jason crept down the dimly lit hallway, everything felt eerily still. He had been on his way back to his room when he heard a voice, Lex's voice, muffled yet sharp, slicing through the quiet. Jason paused, his heart quickening. He recognized the tone, the way Lex spoke when discussing business. But this was different. There was urgency, something almost threatening. Jason flattened himself against the wall, pressing his ear toward the barely ajar office door. "It's too soon," Lex's voice came through, clipped and precise. "I don't care what he thinks, Marcus. This isn't the time." Jason's stomach twisted. Marcus? He had never heard that name before. A second voice, deep and gruff, responded through the speakerphone, but Jason couldn't make out the words. He inched closer, his pulse hammering in his ears. Lex exhaled sharply. "Number, I'll handle it. Keep your men away from me." A long pause. "Jason?" Lex suddenly called, his voice dropping into its usual smooth control. Jason froze. Had he been seen? He held his breath, pressing his back against the cold marble wall. Seconds stretched, each one heavier than the last. Then he heard Lex shift in his chair. "I'll call you back," he said, his tone returning to its usual casual authority. Jason darted away before Lex could step out, his bare feet silent against the floor as he slipped down the hallway and into his room. He shut the door behind him, chest rising and falling rapidly. His mind reeled. Marcus. Who was Marcus? Jason had learned a lot in his time on the streets. How to read people, how to sense when something was off. And this was definitely off. He hesitated for a moment, then grabbed the laptop Lex had given him earlier that day. The sleek machine still felt foreign in his hands, but his fingers moved with purpose as he opened the browser. He typed in the name, Marcus Vance. Dozens of results popped up. News articles, business profiles. Jason clicked the first link. Marcus Vance, alleged crime lord, walks free after trial collapse. His breath caught. The article was from 5 years ago. He skimmed the first few paragraphs, reading about allegations of money laundering, fraud, and more serious crimes, charges that had all mysteriously disappeared before trial. Jason clicked another link. The Montgomery Vance connection. A hidden partnership? His skin prickled. Montgomery, as in Lex Montgomery. The article was dated even further back, 10 years ago. It detailed a rumored business relationship between Lex and Marcus, suggesting that Lex's initial fortune had been built on deals with Vance's criminal empire. But there was no proof, only whispers and accusations that had never led to anything concrete. Jason sat back, staring at the screen. His chest felt tight. Lex had taken him in, given him shelter, food, a life he never thought he'd have. But if these articles were true, Jason closed the laptop, swallowing hard. He needed to think. He had spent his life learning the hard way that trust was dangerous, that people who seemed generous often had their own motives. So what did Lex really want from him? Jason lay down, staring at the ceiling. The warmth of the bed, the safety of the penthouse. It all suddenly felt like a trap. For the first time since arriving, he felt like a stranger in this house. The dim light of the office barely illuminated the thick cigar smoke curling through the air. Marcus Vance leaned back in his leather chair, fingers drumming rhythmically against the mahogany desk. His sharp eyes fixated on the man standing across from him, Lex Montgomery. The tension between them was palpable. "He's asking too many questions," Marcus growled, his voice edged with irritation. Lex remained silent for a moment, his expression unreadable. He had dealt with men like Marcus before, powerful, ruthless, and entirely unafraid of erasing problems that stood in their way. And right now, Jason was becoming a problem. "He's just a kid," Lex muttered, his tone carefully measured. Marcus scoffed, flicking the ash from his cigar. "A kid who's digging where he shouldn't be. You know how this works, Lex. If you let sentiment get in the way, you end up buried next to the ones you tried to protect." Lex exhaled slowly, running a hand down his face. He had spent years severing ties with his past, trying to keep his life clean, but now it was creeping back in. Jason, young, naive Jason, had stumbled onto something dangerous, and if he wasn't careful, he wouldn't survive it. Marcus studied Lex's hesitation and leaned forward. "Look, I don't care what you do with him. Send him away, scare him off, whatever. But if he keeps sniffing around my business..." He paused, tapping his cigar against the ashtray. "You know what happens." Lex's jaw tightened. He did know. Jason had no idea how much danger he was in. Jason had been restless all day. Something felt off, like an itch he couldn't scratch. Since overhearing Lex's conversation about Marcus Vance, he had spent every spare moment trying to piece things together. But now, with the city skyline flickering outside his window, an unease settled deep in his gut. The penthouse was quiet, save for the faint hum of the city below. He sat cross-legged on his bed, his laptop open in front of him. The name Marcus Vance glowed on the screen, followed by article after article detailing his shady dealings. Money laundering, racketeering, political bribery, it was all there, yet nothing had ever stuck. Every accusation had been swept under the rug, every witness had disappeared. Jason swallowed hard. Was this the man Lex had been talking to? The thought made his stomach churn. He had come to trust Lex, despite his initial reservations. But if Lex was involved with someone like Marcus Vance, what did that mean? A sudden ping startled him. His phone vibrated against the nightstand. Jason grabbed it, a cold dread pooling in his stomach when he saw the message. Unknown number. Stay away from Lex. Jason's breath caught. His fingers hovered over the screen. His heart pounded. Another ping. Unknown number. You're in over your head. Walk away while you can. Jason shot up from the bed, pacing the room. His thoughts swirled in a chaotic mess. Someone was watching him. Someone knew he had been searching. But who? And why warn him instead of just making him disappear? He needed answers. He needed to talk to Lex. Now downstairs, Lex stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, a whiskey glass cradled in his hand. The weight of his choices pressed against him. He had tried to keep Jason safe, tried to offer him a life away from the streets, but the truth was catching up fast. A noise made him turn. Jason stood in the doorway, phone gripped tightly in his fist. His expression was a mix of anger and confusion. "You need to tell me the truth," Jason demanded, stepping forward. "Who is Marcus Vance?" Lex sighed, setting his glass down. "Jason, this isn't something you should be involved in." Jason clenched his jaw. Too late for that. Someone just sent me a message warning me to stay away from you. He shoved the phone toward Lex. What the hell is going on? Lex stared at the screen for a long moment, the color draining from his face. Who sent this? He asked, his voice dangerously low. I don't know, Jason said, but I'm guessing you do. Lex exhaled sharply, rubbing his temple. Jason, there are things about my past that I can't change. I tried to keep you out of it, but you had to start digging. Jason's stomach twisted. So it's true? You worked with him? Lex hesitated. Then finally, he nodded. Once, he admitted. A long time ago. But I got out. Jason didn't know what to think. The man who had saved him from the streets, given him a home, had been involved with criminals? Then why is he still calling you? Jason's voice was almost a whisper. Lex didn't answer right away. Instead, he picked up his phone and dialed a number. Jason watched as he turned toward the window, his voice dangerously calm. We have a problem, Lex said. Jason shivered. He had trusted Lex. But now, standing in the shadows of the penthouse, he wasn't so sure. Jason sat on the edge of his bed, the dim glow of the city skyline casting long shadows across the plush carpet. The anonymous note trembled between his fingers, the words burning into his mind like a warning he couldn't ignore. Stay away from Lex. His heart pounded against his ribs. Someone out there knew something he didn't, and they were trying to warn him. But who? And more importantly, why? He turned the slip of paper over, searching for any identifying marks, a signature, anything. But there was nothing, just those 4 ominous words. Jason's mind raced through the events of the past few days. The extravagant penthouse, the warm meals, the unfamiliar kindness of Miranda. And Lex, his charm, his generosity, but also his secrecy. He had overheard that phone call, Marcus Vance. That name felt like a loose thread dangling from an otherwise perfectly tailored suit. Jason knew what he had to do. He had to confront Lex. He had to find out the truth before it was too late. The next morning, Jason sat stiffly at the breakfast table, his spoon clinking against the bowl of oatmeal. Across from him, Miranda scrolled through her phone, occasionally sipping her coffee. Lex, dressed in a sharp navy suit, adjusted his cufflinks before glancing up. Everything all right, Jason? Lex's voice was smooth, unreadable. Jason hesitated, then set his spoon down carefully. I wanted to ask you something. Lex raised an eyebrow, waiting. Jason forced himself to hold eye contact. Who's Marcus Vance? For the briefest moment, Lex's face tensed. Barely perceptible, but Jason caught it. Then, just as quickly, he smiled and leaned back in his chair. Marcus? Lex let out a short chuckle. He's an old acquaintance. Haven't spoken to him in years. Why do you ask? Jason swallowed. He could feel the weight of Miranda's gaze on him now, curious but not suspicious. He had to be careful. He shifted in his seat. I overheard his name the other night. Sounded important. Lex's expression didn't change, but his fingers drummed lightly against the table. Not really. He's just someone from my past. Not worth worrying about. Jason clenched his jaw. He knew a brush-off when he heard one. Miranda set her phone down. Jason, is something wrong? He forced a tight smile. Number just curious. Lex studied him for a moment longer before nodding. Good. No need to dwell on the past. Jason dropped his gaze to his oatmeal, but inside, his frustration burned. He's lying. That night, Jason couldn't sleep. The conversation with Lex replayed over and over in his head. The way he had dismissed the question, the way his fingers tapped the table, the way he smiled too quickly. Jason knew he wouldn't get the truth from Lex. If he wanted answers, he'd have to find them himself. Slipping out of bed, he crept toward the door and pressed his ear against it. The penthouse was quiet, the faint hum of the city the only sound. He eased the door open and stepped into the dimly lit hallway, his bare feet silent against the hardwood floor. Lex's office was at the end of the hall. He had only been inside once, briefly. A room of polished mahogany and dark leather. It was always locked, but Jason had seen Lex enter the code into the keypad before. He had memorized the movements, just in case. Now he stood before the door, his heart hammering. He punched in the code, holding his breath. Beep. The lock clicked open. Jason exhaled shakily and slipped inside, closing the door behind him. The office was neat, too neat. Papers aligned perfectly, bookshelves curated with precision. A large desk sat at the center, illuminated by a single desk lamp. Jason's eyes scanned the room, searching for anything out of place. And then he saw it. A locked drawer. His pulse quickened as he crouched down, testing the handle. Locked, of course. But Lex wasn't the only one who knew how to survive in the shadows. Jason pulled a thin piece of wire from his pocket, a trick he had learned long ago. His fingers worked quickly, the tension in the lock familiar. And then, click. The drawer slid open. Inside, stacks of documents lay in neat piles. Jason rifled through them, his breath catching as he found a folder labeled Marcus Vance. Hands trembling, he flipped it open. The first thing he saw was a photograph, grainy, taken from a distance. A man in a dark coat, shaking hands with Lex. Jason's stomach twisted. He turned the page. Bank transactions. Large sums of money moving between accounts, some leading back years. But it was the final item that made his blood run cold. A letter, addressed to Lex. Jason's eyes darted over the words, his breath hitching. You know the deal, Montgomery. I don't care how much you want to protect her. If Miranda steps out of line, she's mine. Jason's grip tightened around the paper, his vision blurred with disbelief. This wasn't just some old acquaintance. This was a threat, a very real one. And Miranda, sweet, kind Miranda, was at the center of it. Jason shoved the folder back into the drawer, locked it, and carefully exited the office, his mind racing. He made it back to his room, but sleep was impossible. He sat on the edge of the bed, the city's lights blinking outside his window. Lex was hiding something. Marcus Vance was dangerous. And Miranda, she had no idea what kind of danger she was in. Jason clenched his fists. He had a choice. Tell Miranda the truth, or keep this to himself. For the first time since he had entered this new world, Jason wasn't sure who to trust. The grand hall of the Waldorf Astoria glittered with opulence. Crystal chandeliers cast golden light over the polished marble floor, where New York's elite sipped champagne and exchanged carefully measured pleasantries. It was the kind of place Jason Carter never imagined stepping into. Yet, here he was, standing at the edge of a world he didn't belong to, wearing a borrowed tuxedo that felt like a costume. His pulse quickened as he leaned in closer to Miranda, his voice barely above a whisper. Lex isn't who you think he is. Miranda turned her head sharply, her emerald eyes narrowing. Jason, what are you talking about? Jason inhaled deeply, feeling the weight of his discovery. The past few days had unraveled everything he thought he knew about the man who had taken him in. He had seen the files. Marcus Vance was not just an old acquaintance of Lex Montgomery. There were transactions, confidential letters, and records that hinted at a dark history buried beneath Lex's polished exterior. Miranda's fingers tightened around her champagne flute. This is ridiculous, she said, forcing a smile as another guest passed by. We'll talk about this later. Jason shook his head. There might not be a later. He scanned the crowd and spotted Lex across the room, talking to a group of businessmen. The ease with which he navigated the social circles was seamless. Every gesture, every nod calculated. But Jason knew better now. Before Miranda could respond, a presence made the hairs on Jason's neck stand up. He turned slightly and saw him, a man in a dark suit, standing near the far exit. Marcus Vance. Jason had only seen pictures of him in Lex's files, but there was no mistaking that presence. He wasn't speaking to anyone, wasn't drinking or laughing. He was watching them. Jason's stomach twisted. "He's here," he murmured. Miranda followed his gaze. "Who?" Jason hesitated. He wasn't sure how much Miranda knew, how much she would even believe. If he told her everything, would she listen? Or would she just dismiss it as paranoia? But Miranda had already noticed Marcus. Her expression shifted, her grip on the glass tightening. "Jason, I need you to stop this." Her voice was low but urgent. "You don't know what you're getting yourself into." Jason clenched his fists. "Neither do you." Miranda sighed, exasperated. "Lex saved you. He gave you a home, food, a future. Why are you so determined to ruin that?" Jason's heart pounded. "Because none of it is real. You think Lex is some self-made millionaire who just happens to be generous? Number. He's tied to something dangerous, and if we don't figure it out, you might be the one who gets hurt." Miranda's jaw tightened, but before she could respond, a sudden movement caught Jason's attention. Lex was leaving. He was stepping through a private hallway, slipping away from the crowd unnoticed. Jason didn't think. He acted. Without another word, he turned and moved swiftly through the party, weaving between guests, keeping his distance but never letting Lex out of his sight. He had to know where Lex was going. The private hallway was quieter, lined with mirrors and dim sconces. Jason pressed himself against the wall, watching from a safe distance as Lex approached a discreet side exit. A black limousine idled outside, the door already open as if someone was expecting him. Jason's heart pounded as he took a deep breath and made his choice. He couldn't let Lex slip away. Without thinking, he crouched low and moved toward the limo's trunk. The driver had just stepped away to open the door fully for Lex, leaving a brief window of opportunity. Jason slid behind the car, his fingers fumbling with the latch. The moment Lex entered the vehicle, Jason pried open the trunk just enough to squeeze inside before pulling it shut as quietly as possible. Darkness. Silence, except for the distant hum of the city. The limo pulled away from the curb smoothly. Jason pressed himself flat, trying to control his breathing. He had no idea where they were going, but he was going to find out. After what felt like an eternity, the car slowed, turning sharply before coming to a full stop. Jason listened intently as the door opened and footsteps shuffled outside. A deep voice spoke. "Lex, are we alone?" A pause. Then another voice answered, gravelly and measured. "Yes, for now." Jason felt his pulse quicken. "Marcus." Carefully, he pushed the trunk's emergency release just enough to peek outside. They were in an underground parking garage, dimly lit by flickering overhead lights. Lex stood with his back to Jason, while Marcus leaned against a sleek black sedan, arms crossed. "You took a risk coming here," Lex said. Marcus exhaled a puff of smoke from his cigarette, the ember glowing in the darkness. "And you took a risk keeping that boy around." Jason's breath caught. They were talking about him. Lex's voice remained even. "Jason is none of your concern." Marcus chuckled. "Oh, but he is. You think I haven't been keeping tabs? That kid has been snooping. I don't like loose ends." Lex took a step closer. "You leave him alone." Marcus smiled. Cold, predatory. "Or what, Lex? You'll go public with what you have on me? That works both ways." Jason's mind raced. What did Lex have on Marcus? And what did Marcus have on Lex? The silence stretched before Marcus finally sighed. "Look, I don't care what you do with the kid, but he better stop asking questions. Otherwise, He flicked his cigarette to the ground, grinding it under his heel. We both know what happens. Lex didn't respond immediately. His shoulders tensed, his fingers curled into fists. Jason had seen enough. Carefully, he lowered the trunk lid back into place, suppressing the shiver running through his spine. This wasn't just about Lex's past. This was about survival. For all of them. The limousine rolled to a silent stop, its headlights dimming as it reached the warehouse on the deserted dockside. Jason remained motionless in the cramped trunk, his breath slow and controlled. He could hear the rhythmic thud of the ocean lapping against the pier, the occasional whistle of wind slicing through the cracked metal walls of the building ahead. The car door opened and Jason peered through a narrow slit in the trunk, watching as Lex stepped out into the dimly lit space. The air smelled of damp wood and rusting iron. A single hanging bulb flickered above, barely illuminating the cracked concrete floor. Then came another sound. Footsteps. Heavy, deliberate, confident. Jason's heart pounded as he saw a tall, broad-shouldered man emerge from the shadows. Marcus Vance. "You're late," Marcus said, his voice gravelly yet smooth, like a serpent waiting to strike. Lex adjusted the cuff of his suit jacket, unfazed. "Business ran over." Jason barely exhaled as he shifted in his hiding spot, careful not to make a sound. Behind Marcus, a group of men loomed in the darkness. 6 of them, dressed in tailored suits but armed, the unmistakable bulges of weapons visible beneath their coats. This wasn't a simple business meeting. This was something else. Marcus tilted his head, studying Lex. "Unfinished business," he said, voice laced with something dark and final. "That's what this is, isn't it? You owe me." Jason's stomach twisted. Owe him? Lex's jaw tightened, but his voice remained calm. "I haven't forgotten." Marcus took a slow step closer. "You walked away from my empire, Lex. You built yourself a respectable life, rebranded yourself as a clean-cut businessman. But we both know," he leaned in, lowering his voice, "you're still that same man. You just learned how to hide it." Lex didn't move. "You came to my city to shake me down?" Marcus smirked. "I came to your city to remind you that debts must be paid." He flicked his fingers, and one of his men stepped forward, handing him a brown folder. He flipped it open, holding up a photo. Jason's breath hitched. It was him. Lex's expression didn't change, but Jason saw something flicker behind his eyes. Marcus tapped the photo with one finger. "He's been asking questions, poking around places he shouldn't. It's inconvenient." Lex's voice was flat. "He's a kid." Marcus smiled. "And yet somehow he's become your weakness." Jason felt his hands shake as he gripped the edge of the trunk. They knew. He thought he'd been careful, but Marcus had eyes everywhere. Lex exhaled slowly. "Jason has nothing to do with this." Marcus chuckled, low and amused. "I disagree. He's your pet project, isn't he? The boy you're trying to save. But you and I both know what happens to people caught in the middle." He closed the folder, voice cooling. "You have 2 options, Lex. Pay your debt, or I collect in another way." Jason didn't need to see Lex's face to know he was barely keeping his anger in check. His stance stiffened, his fists clenched at his sides. "What do you want?" Lex finally asked. Marcus leaned in. "Everything." Lex didn't flinch, but Jason saw his fingers twitch. "Be more specific." Marcus gave a slow smile. "My accounts were frozen after our last misunderstanding. I want access again. The offshore ones, the clean ones. The ones only you can unlock." Jason's stomach twisted. Marcus wanted Lex to launder his money. Lex's voice was steady, but there was an edge of warning in it. "If I do this, you leave Jason alone." Marcus spread his arms. "I'm a businessman, Lex. I hold up my end of a deal." Silence stretched. Jason barely breathed. Then Lex nodded. Fine. Marcus clapped him on the shoulder. Smart decision. Jason felt a pit of dread sink into his chest. This was bad. Lex was doing this for him, but it wouldn't end here. It never did. Then suddenly, Jason's pocket vibrated. His stomach dropped. His phone. A text message. From Miranda. Where are you? The vibration was soft, but in the stillness of the warehouse, it was deafening. Lex's head turned. Marcus's eyes narrowed. Jason knew. He had seconds. He pushed the trunk open and bolted. Shouts erupted behind him. Get him! Jason sprinted, weaving through the maze of shipping crates. A gunshot rang out, the bullet ricocheting off metal just inches from him. His pulse pounded in his ears. Run! 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 He reached the far end of the dock, lungs burning. He could hear the heavy footsteps behind him. He had seconds before they caught up. A chain-link fence stood ahead. Jason didn't slow. He leaped, hands grasping the cold metal, pulling himself up. Strong hands grabbed his ankle. No, you don't. The voice was rough. Jason kicked, twisting desperately, his foot slamming into his captor's face. The grip loosened, and he climbed higher. More gunshots. He reached the top, threw himself over, landing hard on the pavement below. Pain shot up his side, but he didn't stop. He ran. His phone buzzed again. Miranda. Jason, pick up. What's happening? Jason didn't know where he was going, only that he had to get away. He had to warn Miranda. He had to figure out what Lex was really up to. But most of all, he had to survive. Jason barely had time to react before a pair of strong hands clamped over his arms, yanking him backward with brute force. He struggled, thrashing against the grip, but his captor was too strong. A cloth was shoved over his mouth, muffling his cry as he was dragged further into the dimly lit warehouse. His heart pounded violently against his ribs as his eyes darted around, searching for any means of escape. The warehouse smelled of oil, rust, and something metallic. Blood, maybe. Overhead lights flickered, casting eerie shadows on the cracked cement floor. Jason twisted his body, trying to free himself, but his captor only tightened his hold. A deep chuckle cut through the silence. Well, well, a voice drawled. Look what we have here. Jason was shoved forward and landed on his knees. He barely had time to process what was happening before he looked up and found himself staring into the cold, predatory eyes of Marcus Vance. Marcus stood with an air of absolute authority, his sharp suit perfectly tailored despite the grime of the warehouse. A cigarette dangled between his fingers, the faint orange ember crackling in the dim light. Behind him, several men loomed, their faces shadowed, but their presence unmistakably threatening. Jason swallowed hard, his breathing uneven. You've been snooping where you shouldn't, kid. Marcus exhaled a plume of smoke, his lips curling into a sinister grin. That's a bad habit to have in my world. Jason clenched his fists, forcing himself to keep eye contact despite the fear coiling in his gut. You're the one who's been hiding things, he shot back, his voice steadier than he felt. Marcus chuckled again, the sound low and amused. Feisty. I like that. He flicked his cigarette to the ground, crushing it under his polished shoe before turning his gaze to the figure standing near the shadows. Lex. Jason's stomach twisted at the sight of him. He stood rigid, his jaw set, eyes locked onto Marcus with something between contempt and resignation. His expensive suit was slightly disheveled, as though he had just been through something intense. But it was his expression, cold, guarded, uncertain, that made Jason's blood run cold. You gonna tell the kid the truth, Lex? Marcus taunted. Or should I? Lex exhaled slowly, rubbing his temple before finally meeting Jason's gaze. Jason, you don't understand. I understand enough, Jason snapped. I know about your connection to Marcus. I know you've been lying. A tense silence settled between them. Then Marcus smirked. See, This is where things get interesting. He stepped closer, the weight of his presence pressing down like a storm cloud. You see, kid, Lex here owes me, and I always collect my debts. Jason gritted his teeth. What do you want? Marcus chuckled, his fingers trailing along the edge of a wooden crate. It's not about what I want, Jason. It's about what Lex is willing to give. His eyes flicked toward Lex, his smile widening. And now he has a choice. Jason's heart pounded. What choice? Marcus crouched to Jason's level, his gaze unwavering. It's simple, he said, voice eerily calm. Lex either gives me what he owes, or I take you. Jason's breath hitched. Lex's fists clenched at his sides. Marcus, don't do this. Oh, but I must, Marcus countered. You see, Lex, I've been patient. I've let you run around playing billionaire philanthropist. But patience runs thin. You know how this works. Pay up, or the kid suffers. Jason's mind raced. What did Lex owe? Money? Influence? Something worse? He tried to decipher Lex's expression, but his face was unreadable. Then, without warning, Jason made his move. Summoning every ounce of adrenaline-fueled strength, he lunged forward, slamming his shoulder into Marcus's chest. The crime boss stumbled back with a grunt, giving Jason just enough time to bolt. Shouts erupted behind him. Get him! Marcus barked. Jason ran. His feet pounded against the cold cement floor as he darted through the warehouse, weaving between towering shelves stacked with crates. His breath came in ragged gasps, his lungs burning as he pushed himself harder. Gunfire cracked behind him. Jason ducked instinctively, his ears ringing as bullets splintered wood and ricocheted off metal beams. His heart was a drum, pounding in sync with his rapid steps. He spotted a staircase leading to the upper levels and took it 2 steps at a time, ignoring the searing pain in his legs. He reached a catwalk, his sneakers skidding on the metal grating as he rounded a corner. A dead end. His stomach lurched. He spun around just as Marcus's men burst onto the catwalk, their faces dark with fury. Jason's pulse skyrocketed. He had seconds. His eyes darted to a narrow window high above, barely large enough for him to squeeze through. It was risky, but so was staying. Summoning every ounce of courage, he sprinted toward the ledge, leaped onto a crate, and launched himself toward the window. His fingers caught the frame. He scrambled up, his muscles straining as he hoisted himself through. A hand grabbed his ankle. Panic surged. Jason kicked out desperately, connecting with something solid. A grunt of pain followed, and the grip loosened just enough for him to yank himself free. He tumbled out onto the rooftop, landing hard on his side. Pain exploded through his ribs, but he didn't stop. He rolled to his feet and took off, the cool night air slicing against his skin. Behind him, Marcus's voice echoed into the night. "You can run, kid, but you can't hide." Jason didn't look back. He had to get out of here. He had to survive. Jason pressed his back against a cold metal crate, his breath shallow. The dim warehouse was eerily silent, except for the heavy footsteps echoing across the concrete floor. His heartbeat pounded in his ears as he peered around the corner. 2 of Marcus's men, dressed in dark suits and gripping handguns, scanned the area, their eyes sharp and predatory. He had to find a way out. Suddenly, his phone vibrated in his pocket. Jason froze, carefully retrieving it without making a sound. A single message flashed across the screen. "Miranda, I'm outside. Stay hidden. I'm coming in." His chest tightened. She shouldn't be here. This was too dangerous. But at the same time, the thought of facing Marcus's men alone was equally terrifying. Jason's fingers hovered over the screen, but before he could respond, a voice rang out. "He's close. Spread out." The men moved in opposite directions, forcing Jason to act fast. He darted through the narrow spaces between stacked crates, keeping low as he maneuvered through the maze of shadows. His body trembled with adrenaline, but he forced himself to stay focused. Near the loading dock, he spotted an exit sign glowing faintly in the distance. He could make it, if he moved now. Just as he stepped forward, a figure emerged from the darkness. "Going somewhere, kid?" Jason barely had time to react before a strong hand gripped his wrist, yanking him backward. He struggled, twisting and kicking, but the man was too strong. "Let me go," Jason growled, but his captor only smirked. "You should have stayed out of this," the man sneered, dragging him toward the center of the warehouse. Jason's pulse spiked. He had to think fast. Before he could attempt another escape, the warehouse doors burst open. "Let him go." Jason's head snapped toward the entrance. Miranda stood there, her hands clenched into fists. Behind her, Lex strode in, his face unreadable. Marcus's men stiffened at the sight of him, uncertain about where his loyalties lay. "Well, well," Marcus's smooth, menacing voice echoed from the shadows. "The gang's all here." He stepped forward, flanked by two more of his men. The dim light cast eerie shadows over his features, making his smile look even more sinister. Miranda's eyes locked onto Jason's. "Are you okay?" Jason nodded, even though fear coiled tightly in his stomach. Marcus sighed dramatically. "Lex, my old friend, you really shouldn't be getting in my way." Lex's jaw tightened. "This has gone far enough, Marcus. Let the boy go." Marcus chuckled. "Oh, Lex, you act like you're in control here." He turned to his men. "Make sure they don't leave." Jason's heart pounded as the henchmen stepped forward, blocking the exits. Panic clawed at his throat. They were trapped. That's when he saw it, the fire alarm, mounted high on the wall near the emergency exit. An idea formed in his mind, wild and reckless, but it was their only chance. Jason met Miranda's gaze and gave the slightest nod. She hesitated for a second, then took a slow step back. "Do it," she mouthed. Jason didn't hesitate. With a burst of energy, he twisted out of his captor's grip, sprinted toward the alarm, and yanked it down with all his strength. The warehouse exploded into chaos. A deafening siren wailed, red lights flashing as the sprinkler system activated. Water rained down, drenching everyone in seconds. Marcus roared in frustration as his men scrambled in confusion. "Stop them!" he bellowed. But it was too late. Lex lunged forward, knocking down one of Marcus's men. Miranda grabbed Jason's hand, pulling him toward the exit. "Run!" Jason didn't need to be told twice. He sprinted through the chaos, weaving between the panicked henchmen. Behind them, Marcus shouted, but his voice was drowned out by the approaching sirens. Red and blue lights flashed outside the warehouse. The cops were coming. Jason felt Miranda's grip tighten around his hand as they burst through the exit doors, gulping in the crisp night air. They had made it. But as Jason looked back at the warehouse, he knew this wasn't over. Marcus wasn't the type to let things go, and neither was Jason. The flashing red and blue lights painted jagged shadows across the steel walls of the warehouse. Jason pressed his back against a cold crate, his heart hammering in his chest. The sirens outside grew louder, their wailing chorus a stark contrast to the tense silence inside. Marcus Vance stood at the center of the chaos, his fingers twitching at his sides. His once impenetrable confidence now flickered like a candle in the wind. Around him, his men hesitated, exchanging wary glances. The walls were closing in, and Marcus knew it. Lex stepped forward, his expression unreadable. "It's over, Marcus," he said, his voice calm but edged with steel. "You've lost." Marcus let out a sharp laugh, shaking his head. "You think this is over?" His eyes darted toward the approaching officers outside, then back to Lex. "You of all people should know how this works. Money, power. I can buy my way out of anything." Jason could feel Miranda tense beside him. She had tracked his phone, arriving just in time to see the nightmare unfolding before her. Now they stood together in the shadows, watching the final act of this twisted drama play out. Lex reached into his coat, producing a small flash drive. Not this time, he said, tossing it toward the closest officer, a stern-faced detective who caught it mid-air. Everything you need is on there. Bank transactions, offshore accounts, witness statements. He exhaled. It's all over, Marcus. The detective gave a short nod, signaling to his team. Officers began moving in, their hands resting on their holstered weapons. Marcus's face contorted with rage. You slimy son of a... His hand shot to his waistband. Jason barely had time to react before the gleam of a gun caught his eye. Gun! Someone shouted. Time slowed. Lex stood frozen. Miranda gasped. The officers raised their weapons, but Marcus had the upper hand. Jason's body moved before his mind could stop it. He snatched up a metal pipe from the floor and hurled it. It struck Marcus's wrist just as he was pulling the trigger. The shot rang out, deafening, final. The bullet missed Lex by inches, ricocheting off a crate. The officers lunged. Within seconds, Marcus was on the ground, his face pressed against the cold concrete, his wrists wrenched behind him as handcuffs snapped into place. Jason's breath came in short gasps. His hands trembled. It was over. Marcus growled, struggling as they pulled him to his feet. This isn't over, Montgomery, you hear me? His wild eyes flickered toward Jason. You too, kid. Jason met his gaze, his jaw tightening. Yeah? He straightened, squaring his shoulders. I'm not scared of you. Marcus sneered, but said nothing more as the officers led him out into the flashing lights. Silence settled over the warehouse. Miranda turned to Jason, her eyes filled with a mix of relief and something else, something that looked a lot like pride. You okay? Jason exhaled. I think so. Lex watched them for a long moment before finally speaking. You took a risk, he said to Jason. A stupid, reckless risk. Jason bristled. It worked, didn't it? Lex smirked. Yeah, it did. For the first time since they met, Jason saw something different in Lex's expression, something almost like respect. Outside, the night was cool and crisp, a stark contrast to the suffocating heat of the warehouse. Jason and Miranda stepped out together, the weight of the night settling on their shoulders. Miranda glanced at Lex, then back at Jason. Do you think he was ever really on our side? Jason didn't answer right away. He watched as Lex spoke with the police, his hands tucked into his pockets, his usual smirk subdued. I don't know, Jason admitted, but I think we're about to find out. As the last of Marcus's men were loaded into squad cars, Jason took a deep breath. For the first time in a long time, he felt something he hadn't dared to believe in before. Hope. Jason stood by the window, watching the city lights flicker against the night sky. The view from Lex's penthouse was the same, yet everything felt different. The walls, once cold and unwelcoming, now carried the weight of everything he had been through. His life had changed in ways he never could have imagined, but the biggest question still remained. What happens now? Behind him, Miranda and Lex sat in the grand living room, their expressions a mix of exhaustion and anticipation. The events of the past days had shaken them all, but Jason knew the hardest part was yet to come. He took a deep breath, turned away from the skyline, and faced them. So, what happens now? Jason's voice was quiet, but the question carried all the uncertainty he felt inside. Lex sighed, running a hand through his hair. He looked more human than ever, no longer the polished, untouchable businessman, but a man burdened by his past. That's up to you, Jason, he admitted. I know I've made mistakes, and I won't pretend I'm a good man, but I swear to you, everything I did was to protect you. Jason crossed his arms. Protect me? You lied to me. You were working with Marcus. He stopped himself, shaking his head. How am I supposed to trust you now? Lex's jaw tightened, but his eyes remained steady. I never wanted you to find out this way. Yes, I was involved with Marcus, but I was never truly on his side. He had leverage over me for years, and I did what I had to do to survive. But when you came into my life, everything changed. I wanted to do better, to be better, for you." Jason clenched his fists. Part of him wanted to believe Lex, but how could he? How many times in his life had he been let down by the people who were supposed to care? "You don't have to believe me," Lex continued. "But I'm giving you something no one else has, a choice. If you want to stay, I'll make sure you have everything you need. A home, an education, a future. If you want to leave, I won't stop you." The room fell into silence. Jason felt Miranda's gaze on him, warm and patient. She had been the one person who had never lied to him, never turned away. "I have something for you," Miranda finally spoke, reaching into her bag. She pulled out a thin envelope and handed it to Jason. He hesitated before taking it, his fingers trembling slightly as he opened it. Inside was a letter, neatly typed, with a logo at the top, a school emblem. His heart pounded as he read the first few lines. "We pulled some strings," Miranda said softly. "It's a full scholarship to one of the best private schools in the city. If you want it, it's yours." Jason swallowed hard. The idea of going to school, of having a real chance at a future, felt like a dream, one he had been too afraid to allow himself to have. He thought about the cold nights on the streets, the hunger, the loneliness. He thought about the people who had hurt him and the ones who had saved him. For the first time in his life, he wasn't being forced into something. He had a choice. Jason looked at Lex, then at Miranda, and finally down at the letter in his hands. Slowly, a small, uncertain smile formed on his lips. "I think," he exhaled, feeling the weight on his shoulders begin to lift. "I think I want to stay." Miranda beamed, and Lex let out a breath he had been holding. Jason turned back to the window, looking out at the city, his city. The future was unknown, but for the first time he wasn't afraid. He was ready for whatever came next. Jason sat stiffly in the high-backed chair, his hands gripping the arms as if the polished wood might steady him. The air in the lawyer's office smelled of leather and fresh paper, a sterile kind of scent, but one that carried an unexpected weight. Across the mahogany table, Miranda and Lex sat beside an older man in a tailored suit, his silver-rimmed glasses reflecting the sunlight streaming through the blinds. Miranda slid a document toward him, her expression gentle yet expectant. "This is for you." Jason hesitated. The envelope in front of him was thick, its official-looking seal intimidating. He ran his fingers over the smooth paper, his pulse hammering in his ears. The room, the moment. It all felt surreal. He looked up at Miranda. "What is this?" She exhaled softly, leaning forward. "Adoption papers." The words struck him like a physical force. His breath caught, his fingers instinctively withdrawing from the document. His heartbeat quickened, and for a moment, the room felt impossibly small. "Adoption?" The word came out hoarse, barely above a whisper. Miranda nodded. "I want to make it official. You don't have to decide right now, but—" Jason pushed his chair back abruptly, standing as his chest tightened. "Why?" His voice was raw, uncertain. "Why would you do this?" Miranda's eyes softened. "Because you deserve a family, Jason." Jason let out a sharp breath, shaking his head. His mind spun with memories, sleeping on park benches, digging through dumpsters, keeping his head down in shelters where danger lurked in every shadow. He had fought for survival every single day. Family? That word had never meant anything to him. "I don't know how to be part of a family." The confession slipped out before he could stop it. Lex, who had been silent until now, finally spoke. His voice was steady, low. "You already are." Jason turned to him, something unreadable passing between them. He thought of everything Lex had done, some of it good, some of it questionable. But despite the secrets, despite the danger, Lex had never let anything happen to him. And Miranda, she had been there when no one else had. Miranda reached for his hand but didn't force it, just letting her presence be known. I'm not asking you to change who you are. I just want you to have a place where you're safe, where you don't have to fight every single day just to exist. Jason swallowed hard, his throat tightening. He had spent so much of his life running, surviving, expecting everything to be temporary. The thought of permanence, of a home, terrified him more than any dark alley or looming threat ever had. You don't have to say yes, Miranda continued, but I hope you do. Jason looked down at the papers again. His name was printed clearly on the page, next to Miranda's. It looked so official, so real. A lump formed in his throat as he recalled everything, sleeping on concrete, being ignored by people passing by, the nights he thought he wouldn't make it to morning. He squeezed his eyes shut. For so long, he had believed he didn't deserve anything more. But maybe, just maybe, he did. His hand shook slightly as he picked up the pen. He hesitated only a moment longer before pressing the tip to the paper. The first stroke felt foreign, unnatural. By the time he finished signing his name, he let out a shaky breath, his vision blurred by unshed tears. Miranda reached out again, this time wrapping him in a firm, warm embrace. "Welcome home," she whispered. Jason let himself sink into it, feeling for the first time in his life like he wasn't alone. He wasn't sure what the future held. There were still wounds that needed time to heal, still questions left unanswered. But as he sat there, surrounded by people who refused to give up on him, Jason knew one thing for certain. For the first time in his life, he wasn't just surviving, he was finally living. Jason's journey reminds us all of something profound, that our past does not define our future. Life can be relentless, filled with struggles, betrayals, and moments where giving up seems easier than holding on. But in the end, what truly matters is the people who believe in us, the ones who remind us that we are worthy of love, of second chances, and of a place to call home. This story is not just about Jason. It's about all of us. It's about resilience, about the power of human connection, and about how even the most unexpected people can change our lives in ways we never imagined. So now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever had someone who changed the course of your life? Or maybe you've been that person for someone else. Let me know in the comments below. If this story touched your heart, type 1 in the comments or tell me where you're watching from. I'd love to hear from you. And if this story didn't resonate with you, tell me why. Your thoughts matter. Most importantly, if you enjoy stories that inspire, that make